The French army in World War II was plagued by internal issues, including obsolete hierarchy, political infighting, and outdated tactics, which all contributed to its rapid defeat in 1940. Meanwhile, also, it just sucked, the Italian army between 1940 and 1942. It is kind of funny the way the meme community does this. I've heard plenty of excuses of why the French weren't very effective in World War II, but when it comes to the Italians, it's just memes. Now, of course, we are specifically talking armies here, not navies. I think, some people will say the Italian Navy was alright. Italy might just get this treatment though because they were a part of the Axis, so people are just like, ha, lol, they suck. Whereas the French were on our side, so maybe there's more people willing to make up some sort of, reason for them. But you could probably use all these reasonings also for the Italians. Obsolete hierarchy, political infighting, and outdated tactics. I think that's actually the point of this meme. To be fair to the Italians, the quality of their troops was pretty good. They were not averse to fighting and their tactics were solid. It was an absolute poop show in terms of logistics though. I mean, hey, at least the Italians survived longer than the French, so technically, didn't they get some credit for that? The funny thing is, at the time, the prevailing opinion was the Italian soldiers were just fine. It was their officers that sucked. I think this comment makes a really good point. As for the reason for the Italian army performance and why it gets less attention, that's because it wasn't expected to perform like the best army in the world, and its defeat was much slower and thus less shocking and interesting to study. I mean, they did stick around all the way up until 1943, which is 3 years longer than the French. So I think I agree with that comment for the most part. It was just so shocking because France fell almost out of nowhere. And it was especially crazy because they had done just fine during World War I. They never fell in that big-ass conflict. Yes, and to top it all off, the French are highly considered the best in history. They've won the most battles, even more than the Brits. I think that's why this top event is just not accepted. Like, people have to examine it, like, how the hell did this even happen? I think people just kind of expected Italy to, not make it that long. The US has 100 nukes, so we should surrender! We should all die. What? Wouldn't it be wondrous for this whole nation to be destroyed like a beautiful flower? What? This Japanese man in World War II was trying to go out in a blaze of glory, and that blaze was going to be nuclear destruction. Remember that a lot of the Japanese officials at the time thought the US had a lot more nukes than it did. We only had 3. It is fascinating to do a little bit of research and, guessing on where the 3rd nuke would have been dropped if the Japanese still didn't surrender. They guessed it could have been Tokyo, but I'm pretty sure the US tried to stay away from that city because of, its historical significance. I don't know though, if they still didn't surrender, maybe if the Americans got really desperate, I don't know. Regardless, this guy didn't care, and funny enough, I know this meme sounds crazy. Well, it is crazy. He was a little crazy. But if they actually listened to him, this would have been a fascinating situation. Japan would be in a completely different spot because, like I said, we only had 3. If all the Japanese were like, yeah, let's just go ahead and do this, go out like a beautiful flower, the Japanese would have figured out, oh, the US only have 3. Apparently, it was going to take us 6 months to get up another one. They could have kept on fighting. That's a scary thought. However, mind you, the Soviet Union was invading the Empire of Japan at that time. They did the invasion of Manchuria. So if the US nuked 3 different Japanese cities and they still don't surrender, then I'm thinking the Soviet Union get way further into Japanese territory. Like in that universe, it is very likely that we have a united communist Korea all under Kim Jong-un. Well, it'd be now under Kim Jong-un here like 70 years later. So luckily for South Korea's sake, the Japanese did in fact surrender. Now who knows if after that the Soviets would actually be able to make it to the Japanese islands themselves? That's much more debatable. But yes, to mention that not everyone was on board in the Japanese cabinet, that's an understatement. And Ami, after Hirohito orders to surrender, alright, let's compromise. You surrender, I oof myself. Oh, yep, he did not make it past the 15th of August, 1945. Holy crap, this guy's son ended up serving as Japanese ambassador to China from 2001 to 2006. That's crazy. That is so crazy. What? Oh, he did commit seppuku. What the fuck? Holy crap. I was gonna make that joke, but he did actually do that. I would have said, alright, you first, but knowing World War II Japanese generals, he probably would have, yeah. This event keeps me up at night. If the political class collectively lost their marbles, they take the whole nation down with them, and there are very few guardrails to stop them from happening. Yeah, it's crazy. Lol, wouldn't it be cool though? I mean, the land of the rising sun disappearing under the light of 100 suns does sound kind of poetic. My goodness. This was the highest point of US-China relations. And it's so sad because we will never come close to this moment in history. This is the first film, Rush Hour, which I believe dropped in the year 2000. Holy crap, it was 1998. Yeah, it was definitely the height of US-Chinese relations. It literally only went down from there. Well, it was actually probably still pretty good in 2001 as well. But again, this movie is about a Chinese cop and an American cop kind of working together, and they would never, ever, 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 ever make this movie today nowadays. It's such a great movie, and Hollywood would never even come close. They do not have the balls. Now, keep in mind, one of the reasons why the US and China were so cool is because, well, the US was mostly just concerned about the Japanese in the 90s. In fact, like, we thought that China was a great competitor. We helped build up China just so that Japan wouldn't come close to catching us, moving so much production over there, obviously. That only lasted their explosion in like the early 90s. By the late 90s and into the 2000s, yeah, Japan was on the decline, and well, now the Chinese are this is exactly why there's so much tension going on. Of course, this is not per capita, but biggest economy. Now we need to make another Rush Hour, but Jackie Chan needs to be replaced with like probably a Japanese actor or an Indian actor. No, I don't know. We shouldn't talk about this. Why am I saying this? I'm gonna tell my kids this is Trump and Xi Jinping. Oh yeah, might have been Hong Kong, a little bit different. It is just overall sad to see where relations have gone, because not even that long ago, yeah, China and the US were pretty close. But you know what? It's also like the same case as the US and Russia. People forget that literally World War II we were allied, and before that we were cool. They sold us Alaska. Before the World Wars took place, both of us were just like, hey, screw that British guy. We both initially bonded over our despisal of the British Empire. Makes me think, what other country do we like currently that we won't be liking at some point in the future? There's unfortunately a lot of options. 1959 be like, hey, it's Lee Harvey Oswald. I'm moving to the Soviet Union. Okay, that was always allowed. Oswald in the Soviet Union. I am starting to reconsider my desire about staying. The work is drab. The money I get has nowhere to be spent. No nightclubs, no bowling alleys, no places of recreation except the trade union dances. I've had enough. And here he is coming back in 1962. And America just let him back in. Maybe we shouldn't have done that. By the way, crazy picture of him to use here. I think that's the moment he got shot. Didn't he also get beat up in the Soviet Union too? Didn't they take everything? That's happened a lot. There's a couple different examples I think of Americans moving to the Soviet Union. Obviously the Soviets being extremely suspicious of them, like beating the crap out of them, taking all their money. I love that he thought the Soviet Union would have nightclubs and bowling. There's a Finnish comedy song that I really like featuring a Soviet tourist visiting Finland. He judges that the Finns must be suffering from extreme poverty because the shops are full of goods but the people aren't lining up to buy them. Meanwhile, back at home, people have more than enough money but nothing is in stores for them to buy. Makes me think of this image. This image is so incredibly famous. Some calling it the most important supermarket visit in history. But yes, obviously for some reason Oswald ended up just saying, well, it's all JFK's fault. Well, depending on what story you believe. I think you could still, I don't even know. Is it possible this guy was just an idiot? I mean, yeah. Well, boys, the Cold War has been won. It'll all be smooth sailing from here. History's over. Democracy and free markets have won. Now we just sit back and watch our stocks go up. Wow. Did he actually say that? Famous last words. I do not remember a time of the Cold War. I was born literally after the end of the Cold War. But I do think about this a lot. Like, wow, everyone in the world, especially Americans, must have really been thinking like, wow, we literally just won a game of civilization. Like, you outlasted all the empires after the World Wars, and then it was just you and another country duking it out versus the Soviet Union, and then bam, they collapsed. The US won a cultural victory, or an economic one. That's another way to look at it. So it actually doesn't surprise me at all that people were basically saying this stuff at the time, but here we are 30 years later, and it definitely doesn't feel like that. I can tell you that right now. It does not feel like this game is over. In fact, I think it's heating back up again. God dang it. This title that says, what if this was real? Well, it was real for probably like 10 to 15 years. I think the Great Recession in 2008 really opened some eyes. And since then, it's, yeah, the game's back on. Honestly though, this man is extremely rich. So in a way, he was absolutely right. Now, apparently he didn't say exactly this, or this was like taken out of context. Me, when I destroy the global liberal homogeny because I was feeling bored. Purposelessness. It's what gets us humans. But to be fair, was there people around the same time basically saying this? Yeah, I could definitely imagine that. But it is crazy to jump 30 years later and to see the results of the world, and wow. I don't know what the heck is happening, but man, does it feel more multipolar than it ever has in decades, maybe over a century. The Dutch just casually discovering the Australian landmass, then leaving without doing anything to it. It was like, whatever. That's cool. Let's just leave that. There's literally giant hopping rats rats that'll fight you over there, I think we don't need to deal with all that. That's probably what they said, something like that. I get it. I'm always so shocked whenever I re-Google this number. The Dutch founded Australia in 1606. Why does it feel like it was way after that? I would think maybe at least 150 years after that. Remember that the Dutch were quite focused on what is modern-day Indonesia. I guess perhaps there's a chance that when they first discovered it, they just thought it was like another island. I mean, look at all the islands in Indonesia. They probably didn't think it was going to be this massive continent that Australia is. Or maybe they did. They did call it New Holland. Still, I mean, it's just a giant desert continent. What are you going to do with all that? Should be noted here, the title says, not overly simplified at all. Does it have spice? No. Then frick off then. To their defense, they found the West Coast. If my first impression was a barren coast, I probably didn't care. It's so insane because the British didn't start colonizing that continent until 1788. That's like 180 years after. Everyone just left it there. And you know what's even funnier? The Brits were just using it as a prison colony too. Treating this landmass like crap. How many civilizations did it? The British Empire said, yeah, we need a giant continental prison colony. I guess we'll throw it here. The spiders scare me. What the frick is that? Giant rabbit on 2 legs abomination. The Dutch probably. They also found Tasmania. Then the British decided that it'd be a cool place for political prisoners and bread thieves. Also the Polynesians settling the islands of Madagascar to Hawaii, then ignoring Australia. I mean, remember what Australia looks like. I don't care what civilization you're coming from, this doesn't look like a very fun place to live. I can't blame them, honestly. Like, I get it. Look at this. The ancient Polynesian people literally said, yeah, everything else but that spot. Frick that spot. Stay as far away from that thing as possible. Maybe they just had to see the spiders once. Once you see the spiders, you'll never want to go back. And big ol' thanks to my April patrons. I time traveled back in 2025 to stop Drew from taking over the world. We only have 2 years left. Drew's Argentinian Trust Fund, Rip Grandpa. Alexander the Terrible. Carmel S. Connor Pavlik. DOOCHBAGGINS. Fredrik Tibblin. KingBearHaze. KirinoIsBestGirl. The Go. Nolan. NordTyrol. And Tambre.